Hello, and welcome to our grant reader training video hosted by the Women's Fund of Central Ohio as part of our 2022 grant making cycle. We're so glad that you're here. Every year, we bring together hundreds of community grant readers because grant reading is an important part of our annual grant making program. And every year, it's made special by people like you who dedicate your time to helping us review and score applications. You get to learn about many incredible programs serving women and girls in Central Ohio, and you get to see firsthand how funding decisions at the Women's Fund are made. Not only do you get to see it, you get to influence these decisions. Your perspective is crucial to ensuring that our grants are equitable and effective. However, every year we get so many wonderful applications that we simply don't have the capacity to fund, and every year important work is left on the table. If you're able, please consider making a donation to the Women's Fund of Central Ohio today to help us scale our programming in future years. You can make a donation at www.womensfundcentralohio.org/donate. All right, let's get started. Today, we're going to go over a little bit about the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, a little bit about our shared grant reading model, what to expect in your role before, during, and after grant reading, how to read and score applications, and finally, understanding consensus. So first, about the Women's Fund of Central Ohio. The Women's Fund is a public foundation, and our mission is to transform the lives of women and girls by mobilizing the collective power and passion of all people working together, and that includes you. Our vision is a world where gender equity is the norm in work and life, and we're committed to creating social change through our strategic investments in women and girls. And that's what you're participating in on Grant Reading Day by being one of our grant readers. We also make social change through our groundbreaking research and our bold advocacy. We think that those are all really important levers to creating social change for women and girls. Our shared grant reading model. Every year, we bring together hundreds of community grant readers to review and score grant applications because we believe that those being funded should have a seat at the decision-making table. We believe that women are the experts of their own lived experiences and should be trusted to design solutions that are equitable and effective. By centering the voice of the community, we ensure that our funding decisions are based on the lived experiences of women and girls from all backgrounds and identities. And that's why this day and the time that you're giving is so important to ensuring that we are creating social change for all women in Central Ohio. What to expect before Grant Reading Day. Before Grant Reading Day, there's just a few things that we need you to do and know so that you're ready to participate on December 11th. The first thing is to make sure that you know which email you applied with. Hint, it's the email at which you're receiving information about Grant Reading Day, and register on Zoom using that email address. That's really important because we need to make sure that we can get you into the right breakout room in Zoom so that you can meet with your group and discuss the applications that you've read. The second thing is to watch this video, so you're already there, to ensure that you understand what types of programs you're looking for on Grant Reading Day and how to score them effectively. The third thing that we need you to do before Grant Reading Day is to pre-read all of the attachments, including the agenda, the key terms and concepts, and the Zoom tips. Importantly, the fourth thing is to look for an email the week of November 29th with the scoring rubric and the applications assigned to your group. And lastly, please make sure that you read and score the applications assigned to your group using the provided rubric so that you are prepared to discuss on Grant Reading Day. So again, please read and score all of the grants assigned to you before Grant Reading Day so that you're able and ready to discuss them with your group on December 11th. What to expect on Grant Reading Day. So on Grant Reading Day, it's going to be so fun. We're going to have a couple hundred people on Zoom, and you'll get to see lots of faces that you know and don't know. And we're really, really excited to have you all. Of course, we wish that we could see you in person, but we're excited to see your face on Zoom nonetheless. So day of, we do ask that you log into Zoom with the email address that you applied to be a grant reader with and that you registered for Zoom with a few minutes before 9 a.m. just to make sure that your technology is working and our technology is working, and so that way we're ready to go at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m., we'll do a welcome with the full group. You'll get to see everyone, like I said. And starting at 9:30, that's when we'll break out into Zoom breakout rooms with your group. It'll be a group of people, probably 5 to 6 other people who have read the same grant that you have before grant reading day. And you'll have the opportunity to discuss those applications with the others in your group. You'll also have a group leader, and the group leader will help you keep time, achieve consensus, and just guide you through the grant discussion process. So starting at, like I said, 9:30, we will break out into the groups and you'll start discussing the grant applications. You'll discuss grant application 1 and 2. For each grant, you'll have about 20 minutes, and then we'll do a short break so that you can get water, do anything that you need, and come back refreshed to talk about grant number 3. At 10:40, we'll come back to discuss grant application 3, and this will be within your small groups. At 11, we'll discuss grant application 4, because some of your groups will have 4 applications to read and discuss. Or, if needed, you can also review previous applications if you weren't able to come to a final score during the 20-minute period allotted for that grant application. At 11:20, we'll start to wrap up within your individual groups. And we ask that you select a speaker. And this will be someone that will share out in the main group something that you enjoyed or something that you learned from your small group discussions throughout the morning. At 11:30, we'll return to the main room and then we'll start the share out. So you're welcome to share. Not every group will have to share, but we'd love to just hear how your experience went throughout the morning, what you learned, what you loved, what is a program that you can't wait to tell others about. At 12:15, we'll start to close, but we will have some additional time if necessary for any groups that didn't have a chance to finish scoring their applications, and we'll keep the Zoom open until 1 in order to do that. A couple things not to forget. So first off, don't forget to have copies of your applications, the ones that were assigned to you, and your completed rubrics handy on grant reading day. We recommend printing these out if you can, since you'll be on your screen all morning. Be mindful of the time when you're in your small groups. Your group only has 20 minutes to discuss each application, and we know that can go by really quickly. So be mindful of the time. Your group leader will obviously be there to help you with that, but just something to not forget on grant reading day. Thirdly, we call this take space, make space. And what this means is to be mindful of the space that you're taking up in your grant reading group and to ensure that others have the opportunity to share their perspective as well. Since we only have 20 minutes per grant application, make sure that everyone in your group is included and has the opportunity to share. And lastly, the last thing not to forget is that the scores that you give as part of grant reading day directly impact our funding decisions. And so they're really, really important. And we so appreciate you showing up to do this, and do want to remind you that it is a responsibility, and we're so grateful to have you be a part of it and help us pick the grant applications that we should fund this year. And so keep that in mind as you're scoring, that these are real programs and real people that'll be affected by what you do on grant reading day. What to expect after grant reading day. So after grant reading day, your group leader will complete your group's rubric and share the final scores with our Women's Fund team. So you'll bring all your individual scores together as part of the discussion on grant reading day, and you'll come up with one score that your group agrees on for each grant application that you read. And then your group leader will share those scores back with us. Applications that score 70 out of 100 are sent to the Women's Fund Grants Committee for review. The Women's Fund Grants Committee thoroughly reviews every application and your group's notes and creates a recommended funding slate. This is essentially a list of the programs that, based on your recommendations, that they think we should fund. After preparing the slate, they share this with our Women's Fund Board of Directors, and our Board of Directors ultimately votes on the final slate and makes the funding decisions. Lastly, the official slate is announced and funds are distributed in early 2022. Reading and scoring applications. Now we'll go over what to look for as you're reading and scoring these applications. You're looking for programs that, first and foremost, align with our priority areas. Our priority areas at the Women's Fund are economic empowerment and leadership for women and girls. And all grant applications must fall under one of these two main priorities. Within these priorities, There are lots of sub-priorities, and so each grant will need to align with one of these. Those sub-priority areas are childcare and the benefits cliff, access to contraception, reduction of teen pregnancy via comprehensive, medically accurate sex education, paid leave, pay equity, women running for elected office, advocacy training through voting rights and informed voting, women's leadership and influence on policy, girls' leadership, and women's philanthropy. So you're looking for programs that align with one of these areas, or maybe more, but at least one. Secondly, you're looking for programs that use a gender lens. When a program uses a gender lens, it examines an issue with a focus on the lived experiences of women and girls and acknowledges the impact that gender has on their opportunities. At the Women's Fund, we believe that gender powerfully impacts experience, and we're looking for programs and organizations that share in that belief. This includes whether women or girls have influenced the design of the program, whether the gender lens is intersectional, and how race, ethnicities, or other identities are considered. It also might include how barriers to participation have been considered, including transportation and childcare access, or how a gender lens focus is maintained if the program also serves men or boys. These are just a few examples. We're looking for programs that use a gender lens. Thirdly, we're looking for programs that disrupt gender norms. Gender norms are the conventional ideas society has about what it means to be a man or a woman. Gender norms can be explicit or implicit, and with persistent use, come to be seen as natural, and that can be really dangerous. What are the explicit or implicit gender norms that this program would disrupt? And how will disrupting these norms impact systemic gender inequality? Those are the kinds of questions you're going to be asking yourself as you're reading and scoring these applications. Does this program disrupt rigid gender norms? We're also looking for programs that create social change. And we know that social change can be a little bit hard to understand, so we want to break it down for you. At the Women's Fund, we look at social change through 5 main shifts. And we'll go through what each of these shifts mean and also give you an example of each one. So the first one is a shift in definition. And that's when the issue is defined differently in the community or larger society. For example, a few years ago, one of our grant partners reported that girls in their program shifted their definition of what it means to be a leader to one that's more inclusive, broad, and representative of various opportunities and skills. They began to view and define themselves as leaders and as role models. And that's an example of a shift in definition, and that's social change. The second example, and the second shift, is a shift in behavior. And this is when people in the larger society start to behave differently. One of our grant partners recently reported a significant shift in behavior because their program, and through their program, 13% of women who participated in it ran for political office, and 21% of their program participants hold positions of public leadership. Their alumni serve in public offices all across the state of Ohio as a direct result of their programming. So that's a shift in behavior because people started behaving differently. Women started running for office more, and as a result, they were elected and were able to use their power to influence change for more women. That is social change. The third shift is a shift in engagement, and it's really similar to a shift in behavior. It's when people in the community or larger society are more engaged in the issue. So it's a little bit different. A few years ago, one of our grant partners had an initiative that focused on young girls. And as a result of their programming, they saw an increase in civic engagement from these girls and impacted the lives of over 900 young women by educating them about the government, how it works, and the importance of being an active citizen and an informed voter. So their programming helped girls get more engaged in the civic fabric of their community. And that was a shift in engagement, and that leads to long-term social change. The fourth one is a shift in policy. And this is one that's a little bit easier to understand because we know that policy can lead to social change at a systemic level for women all across the state. This is when an institutional, organizational, or legislative policy or practice has changed. Many of our grant partners are actively advocating for better laws and policies for women, including bills calling for access to paid leave, access to health care, pay equity, and more. We believe that funding and supporting experts in policy is the best path towards enacting policy change, and that leads to long-term social change. Lastly here, and this one's really important, is maintaining or holding the line. And this, although a little bit different than the others, is still social change. And this is when earlier progress on the issue has been maintained in the face of opposition. We've seen a lot of this recently, especially during the pandemic. For example, in one recent state budget process, the threshold for access to childcare benefits was almost reduced below the existing threshold of 130% of the federal poverty line. This was really dangerous, and it would have affected a lot of women and families negatively. We partnered with one of our grantees to advocate for maintaining the current threshold of 130%, with the hopes that we would eventually be able to raise it. And we were able to maintain it at that time. And that is still social change, because we made sure that the women who were affected by that policy continued receiving the services that they need despite widespread opposition. And that is social change. So those are the 5 shifts that we use to determine whether or not a program creates social change. Here's a couple more examples. One way to think about social change is social change as it relates to direct service. So direct service organizations are an incredibly important part of our community and of our civic society. What we're looking to fund at the Women's Fund are social change programs that focus on long-term systemic change. Here's an example of what a direct service organization might provide. They might provide a scholarship for one high school student to attend college. And that would be so important, and it would probably change that student's life. What we'd be looking to fund at the Women's Fund is a program that's working to make higher education accessible and affordable for everyone, so that every student could afford higher education. Another example would be donating to a food pantry to provide necessary resources to families experiencing poverty. That would be a direct service, and that's also incredibly important. Families deserve to have their basic needs met. But what we would be looking for to fund at the Women's Fund would be donating to a group that's working to raise the minimum wage so that more people can afford to purchase the food that they need. And that's solving the problem at a systemic level. And that's the difference between direct service and social change. Both are incredibly important. It's just a matter of what we're strategically trying to fund at the Women's Fund. Now we're going to go over how to use the scoring rubric. We hope that it's straightforward for you, but we're also here if you have any questions. So this is what your rubric will look like. This is what one section of it looks like. And you're going to want to make sure that you have one rubric for every grant application that you read. So you're going to fill out at least 3, maybe 4 rubrics, and you're going to have those ready for grant reading day. If you look at this example here, number 2 is where you're going to see what section of the rubric you're on. And this corresponds directly to the section of the grant application. And this also tells you the total points that you can score on this section. There are 7 sections total. Where the 3's at, this is the criteria. So this is the general criteria that's required for this section of the application. Number 4 shows you what the scoring scales are. So in this example, 0 to 7 is somewhat meets, 8 to 15 would be meets, and 16 to 20 would be exceeds. Now keep in mind that each section of the rubric might have a different total point value, and with that, a different scoring scale. So keep that in mind as you're scoring. Number 5 is where you're going to find the specific criteria that you're looking for in the application. The criteria go from basic to challenging, and this gives you the specific details that you'll need to pick the score that you think is best for the application. Number 6 is where you write in that score. And number 7 is where you explain why you gave that score. You can use these notes when you discuss the application and your scores with your group, and you can provide them back to our team so that we can look at why you gave the score that you did. Most importantly is that you fill this out for grant reading day so that you're ready to discuss with your group the applications that you all read. Understanding consensus. Consensus is a really important part of our annual grant making program. And we want to make sure that you understand that what that means. Your group leader will also be there to help you with this. Consensus, we use consensus because it's a little bit different than just total agreement, because we think that decision making can actually happen when everyone is on a different level of agreement within this scale. So there are different levels of consensus, and we're going to walk through each one. The first one is that you're enthusiastic about the decision. You're satisfied that the decision is an expression of the wisdom of the group, and you're 100% on board. That's the first level of consensus. And we hope that everyone gets there, but it's totally okay if not. The second one is that you find the decision the best choice. It's the best of the real options that you have available. And that is still within consensus. So it might not have been, your most ideal score, but you think it's the best choice and you're willing to go with it. The third level of consensus is that you can live with the decision, although you're not especially enthusiastic about it. And again, that is okay. That's why we bring together a diverse group, because we want diverse perspectives. And we believe that decision making can still happen with different perspectives. The fourth level of consensus is that you don't fully agree with the decision and you need to share your view about it, but you don't choose to block the decision and you're going to stand aside. That means you're willing to support the decision because you're trusting the wisdom of the group. So this is where you really don't agree with the decision, but you also think that maybe since the rest of the group agrees with it, that you're willing to stand aside. And that's really great, and that's important. So within those first four levels, we do have consensus, and that means that the grant score can be finalized and you can move on. If you fall within these last two levels, that means that consensus has not been reached and more discussion is necessary to come up with a unanimous score. The fifth level is that you do not agree with the decision and you feel the need to block it from being accepted as consensus. And the last one is that you feel like there is no clear sense of unity in the group and that more discussion is needed. If anyone is in either of these last two levels of consensus, then that means that consensus has not been reached and that your group needs to discuss further to come up with a score. Your group leader will walk you through this. We want to make sure that you had an understanding of what consensus means before you get to grant reading day on December 11th. We're so glad that you spent this time with us. Whether you're a new grant reader, you're participating in our program for the very first time, or you've done this many times and you're serving as a leader this time around, we're so grateful for you. Thank you for making our program what it is. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at grants@womensfundcentralohio.org or give us a call anytime. Thanks again, and we'll see you on December 11th.